And we're glad you're with us from New York every single day. Kevin McCullough in the AFA Today newsroom, and we are grateful that you're with us online at afatoday.com. That's the Facebook page. You can like us, join us. Several hundred people in just the last couple of weeks have decided to do that. You're looking at a live shot of the Brooklyn Bridge. If you are watching us on the AFA channel, and it is a muggy, rainy. We had some flash floods earlier today, but it is nothing compared to what those firefighters are dealing with in Arizona. And our hearts and prayers are with their families today. Coming up on the big broadcast, this is a blockbuster hour that we've got for you in the next little bit. The story that we brought to the airwaves on Friday, due to the good reporting of our first guest today, will be amplified a little bit, and we'll have some new updates from Raymond Ibrahim, who is the one that has uncovered this document that we told you about on Friday, that implicates President Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood in the attack on Benghazi. And then an exclusive before we're done with Lila Rose, who you may know is the president of Live Action. She has released another one of her what should be award-winning short films, and we're going to ask her why in today's broadcast. So I'm so glad that you're with us. Kevin McCullough, glad to be with you from New York every single day. And I want to go straight to our first story, because that is the one that and I have to say that even in the processing of my syndicated column over the weekend, there was some dispute over in the editorial division of some of the publications that print me. There was some dispute over whether or not they should even print it, based on the fact that there has been so little reporting done on the story that we brought to you on Friday. But the man who was the cause of all of that stuff that we talked about on Friday, and probably was the cause of the delay of the publication of my column, Raymond Ibrahim joins us now from an undisclosed location. Raymond, welcome to AFA Today. Kevin McCullough, very glad to welcome you to us today.
Hello, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Sure thing. And I want to say that you're the author of the new book, I just want to pull it up and make sure I say it right. Crucified Again, Exposing Islam's New War on Christians. Before we get into the discussion of the news headlines of the day, tell me just a little bit, the thumbnail of the book.
Yeah, sure. Well, the book is basically it's meant to fill a vacuum, which is how the mainstream media has completely ignored this phenomenon, which in many ways is probably the greatest human rights crisis going on, because from one end of the Islamic world to the other, in various nations that are white, black, yellow, red, Christians are being persecuted. The churches are being burned. They're being outlawed. They're being arrested and killed because they're considered blasphemers, or they're apostates to Islam. Muslim apostates to Christianity. Their children are being targeted. It's really a horrific story, and it's not being mentioned by the mainstream media, or if it is, it's being sort of dissembled and whitewashed and minimized. And so the whole purpose of the book is to show this, and also actually it ties in very well to what we'll be talking about, because you'll understand that the very same animus that is being directed against Christians is exactly the same animus that animates the Muslim Brotherhood, the Salafis, Al-Qaeda, basically all sorts of Islamists, because in the end, we're all infidels, Christians, Jews, and so forth.
That's the voice of Raymond Ibrahim. You can follow him online on his website, RaymondIbrahim.com. That's IBRAHIM. Raymond is the first name, and you may have seen him on some media outlets. But Raymond, the people that follow the issue of terror and the danger of Islamic Jihad speak of you with great authority. And when I did a little bit of research on your background, and I begin to understand why, but for the sake of my listeners, let them know today why it is you come at these subject matters that you write about with such unique perspective, but also context.
Sure. I think it really traces back to the fact that personally, that is privately, and also professionally, I've for a very long time been immersed in these topics. My parents are Egyptian Copts who actually left Egypt in the late 60s. As a result, I was born here in the United States, and so I.
And for people, and Raymond, I just want to make sure people understand what you said. You didn't say they were Egyptian Copts like policemen. You're talking about Coptic Christians out of Egypt.
That's right. That's right. And you bring up a good point, because I should know this, because oftentimes when I say I'm a cop, the first question I get is which precinct I work for. So I'm glad you stopped it.
No problem.
Cops are basically the indigenous inhabitants of Egypt, who were all primarily Christian before Egypt was conquered in the 7th century, and so there's still a very small remnant. Well, actually, not very small. It's in the millions, but it's probably 15% of the entire nation. And so anyway, that's my parents, and they came here, and I grew up sort of with an advantage in that I grew up immersed in Western American culture, but also at home I was exposed to sort of the Egyptian mentality and worldview, and I also grew up bilingual, so I knew English and Arabic. So even from youth, I would follow these stories. I had no choice because my father was always watching satellite TV and such. But then when I got older, in college, I majored in history, and especially of this region. My MA thesis was actually about a battle between Islam and Christendom in the 7th century, and then I went on to D.C. I studied in Georgetown University, the Center of Contemporary Arab Studies, which of course was eye-opening on various levels. And then I worked at the Library of Congress in the Near East section as a reference assistant for books in Arabic and other Middle Eastern languages. And, I was the associate director of the Middle East Forum and so forth. So basically, and like I said, personally and professionally, I've been so immersed in this that it's just,
right.
It's just kind of everyday thing for me.
Well, I appreciate you taking time to be with us today. I do want to get to the story that brought us together. A mutual friend, Brooke Goldstein, who runs the Lawfare Project here in New York, passed on to me an article that was that you were cited in fact, I saw the one that you actually then wrote, in which the unearthing of a document this last week, it started being mentioned in Arab websites across the Middle East. But it gathered some attention from you, and I want to ask you. I told people on Friday what I believed this document said, but you've actually had a chance to look at it and to read it. What is significant about the Libyan intelligence memo that you wrote about last week?
Well, what's significant about it is that it indicates and it lists by name Mohamed Morsi, the president of Egypt, and various other names. I wrote them. A lot of them are probably not familiar to most Western leaders, but they're very familiar to me, and they're basically top Muslim Brotherhood and Salafi figures in Egypt, and how they were all involved in one way or another. The document doesn't specify how. It says that the Egyptian cell that was caught and interrogated in the midst of interrogations, which you can rest assured are probably very brutal, those names surfaced. So we don't know exactly how it's involved. The document doesn't indicate, but it does say that those names were among the more prominent names. So there's probably other names that came up. But
so to be clear, just so that we don't leave anyone confused. So to be clear,
okay.
this document details some confessions that people were taken into custody following the Benghazi attack.
It says following the Benghazi attack, there were a lot of people who were arrested in connection. And then some of those who were Egyptian ended up, from their confessions, exposing another, another Egyptian cell in Libya that was found, and those people were brought in. And then those people, during the interrogations, those names came up, Morsi and so forth, as being responsible for financing and or planning it or supporting it. I wrote the words exactly. I translated the key elements of the document, and I summarized the rest. But it just basically said they were involved in those aspects, either supporting it financially or being the head planners or something to that effect.
But that's how we know. That's how we know that terrorist attacks happen. I mean, and I think one of the things that confused people the night of Benghazi was that you had this discussion that started to come out of Washington, D.C. over the next several days about how it was a spontaneous thing, and these people were just walking down the street, and the next thing you know, they were angry and they were tearing the consulate apart. But in reality, from that first night, and as we know from Greg Hicks' testimony now and from others that were on the ground there, the guys that carried out the attack that night had mortars, they had rocket launchers, they had significant equipment, arms, and it appears capital to pull off the attack that they did. From the very beginning, it seemed like there had to be some sort of financing, some sort of planning, some sort of strategy, some sort of logistical execution behind the scenes in order for something to take place that night.
And not to mention the fact, I agree absolutely with what you just said, but add to that also that if this was about a movie and it was an impromptu riot, wow, what a coincidence. It happened on September 11th. I mean, it seems like so many people have missed that date, and the
Right.
significance of that date and the fact that that date itself indicates that it was planned for that date and not that it was just a reaction to a movie that just so happened to be on that date. But to go to an earlier point you're making, which I think is very important, which is why aren't other people talking about this? Is this a hoax? Is this not true? And so forth. I'll tell you why I believe in it, and it's because, and it actually ironically traces back to Benghazi, because when the Benghazi attack on the consulate occurred, 2 days before that, I actually wrote an article based on a very small Arabic website, even smaller than the ones that I'm using for this story, that said that that people were protesting and that they were planning on attacking the embassies. I think it was specifically talking about Egypt, saying they're going to attack the embassies in protest of the blind sheikh. And so days before the attacks happened, Arabic media, small ones, were indicating that there was a planned attack on U.S. embassies / consulates in the Middle East as a retaliation or in a way to demand the release of the blind sheikh. Now, of course, I wrote about it at the time, and it was kind of like, who cares, who believes it, whatever. And then it happened, and then, of course, our wonderful popular media came up with the story or followed the story that it's about a movie and so forth. And so the point here is, oftentimes these very small, independent Arabic websites will tell you very much what's going on and the truth. And then when you juxtapose what they're saying with what the popular media, especially in the West, is saying, it doesn't jive at all. And then you find out, in retrospect, they were right in the beginning. And so moving to this document, which is now kind of being ignored, and who knows if it's true or not. Well, everything it says really squares away with what a lot of people have done by connecting the dots insofar as Morsi's role in all of this.
If you're just joining us, we're speaking with Raymond Ibrahim. He's an American research librarian, translator, author, and columnist, and working with David Horowitz and others watching what's going on, particularly in the Middle East. And Raymond, I'm just so thankful for your work. It's so vital for us to have early flag wavers like yourself out there drawing attention to this. There's a couple of implications that if President Morsi of Egypt was involved, and there's more than just this document. It seems that in the investigation there also surfaced a video. Tell us about that as well.
Sure. Well, the video, I saw that early on, and other people have seen it, and other people have translated, and it's amazing because it's one of those videos that every time it's put on YouTube, it's taken down. And, I understand